John Carter never liked cleaning. His small apartment in New York was always a mess. Dirty dishes stacked in the sink, clothes thrown over the couch, and dust gathering on every surface. He worked long hours at his tech job, and by the time he got home, he was too tired to care about cleaning. One evening, as he scrolled through job listings online, an advertisement caught his eye. Need help at home? Try an intergalactic maid today. Affordable, hardworking, and trained for Earth homes. John blinked at the screen. An alien maid. He had heard about the new work program allowing extraterrestrials to take jobs on Earth, but he never thought about hiring one. Curious, he clicked on the ad. The website looked official, with glowing reviews from customers. He scrolled through the list of available workers, their species, and their special skills. Some aliens had extra arms for faster cleaning. Others could remove stains using biochemical abilities. Then he saw a profile that made him stop. Name: Zyra. Species: Veleri. Special skills: deep cleaning, organization, and surface polishing. Her picture showed a humanoid figure with smooth silver blue skin, large glowing eyes, and long, delicate fingers. Unlike the others, her description was simple. I clean with devotion. John chuckled. Sounds serious about her job. Without thinking much, he clicked hire now. The next morning, John woke up to a buzzing sound at his door. He opened it and saw Zyra standing there, holding a small metallic bag. She was taller than he expected, almost 6 feet, and her silver blue skin shimmered slightly in the sunlight. John Carter, she asked in a soft, melodic voice. Yeah, that's me. You must be Zyra, John replied, stepping aside. Come in. She tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes scanning his face before stepping inside. The moment she saw the messy apartment, her expression changed. Her fingers twitched, her breath quickened, and she let out a small, excited gasp. John frowned. Are you okay? Zyra turned to him, eyes wide with what looked like pure joy. It is perfect. John raised an eyebrow. Perfect. His place looked like a disaster zone. Without another word, Zyra removed a small silver disc from her bag and pressed it. Instantly, tiny floating orbs emerged, buzzing softly as they spread around the apartment. What are those? John asked. Cleansing spheres, Zyra replied. But I will do the true work with my hands. Before John could say anything, Zyra had already started moving, and she moved fast. John had never seen anyone clean like Zyra. Her hands glided over surfaces like she was performing a sacred ritual. Every time she wiped something, it sparkled as if brand new. She didn't just dust the shelves, she whispered softly to them, and the dust seemed to vanish on its own. She didn't just mop the floor, she traced elegant patterns, making the tiles gleam like polished diamonds. John stood there, arms crossed. You're really into this, huh? Zyra paused, blinking as if confused. This is my purpose. Right, John said, rubbing his neck. Well, keep going, I guess. As Zyra cleaned, she began humming softly, a strange but soothing tune. Her glowing eyes seemed to shine even brighter. After a few minutes, she picked up a dirty coffee mug from his table. She carefully scrubbed it until it gleamed like glass. Then, with a soft, almost shy smile, she handed it back to him. John hesitated before taking it. Thanks. Zyra's skin shimmered a deep shade of violet for a moment. Her eyes softened with something strange, admiration. John didn't understand why, but it felt like he had just done something very important. Hours passed, and Zyra showed no signs of slowing down. Every time John tried to tell her to take a break, she only shook her head and said, I must finish. By the evening, his apartment was completely transformed. Every surface was spotless. The air smelled fresh. Even the old carpet looked brand new. John whistled. Wow, you did a great job. Zyra stepped forward and suddenly knelt in front of him, bowing her head. John stiffened. What are you doing?" She lifted her gaze and said in a serious voice, "It is done. We are bonded." John's stomach dropped. "Wait. What? Bonded? What do you mean?" Before he could finish, Zara smiled, her eyes filled with something deep and unexplainable. John suddenly felt like he had just made a terrible mistake. John sat frozen, staring at Zara as her words echoed in his mind. "We are bonded. Bonded." That sounded serious. Too serious. He let out a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. Zara, what do you mean by that?" Zara tilted her head slightly, as if confused by his question. "It is the way of my people," she said softly. "When one accepts our service, they accept our devotion. It is an agreement of trust, of loyalty, a sacred connection." John blinked. A sacred connection. For cleaning. Zara's glowing eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion. Cleaning is not just a task. It is a gesture of care, of deep understanding. John shifted uncomfortably. "Okay, but I just hired you to clean my apartment. That's it. No sacred bonding or anything like that." Zara's silver-blue skin shimmered, a faint hint of violet passing through it. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to process his words. "You do not understand," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, no kidding," John muttered. He got up and started pacing the room, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I appreciate all the work you did, really. This place has never looked this clean in my life. But I think there's been some kind of miscommunication here." Zara remained kneeling, her gaze never leaving him. Then, slowly, she stood. "You do not wish for my service." John sighed. "It's not that. I mean, yeah, I do need help around here, but not if it comes with some weird cosmic contract I don't understand." Zara looked down at her hands. For the first time since arriving, she seemed hesitant, almost uncertain. "Where I come from," she said softly, "to clean another's home is an act of the highest honor. To be accepted means to be trusted beyond all else." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "You took the cup I cleaned and drank from it." John frowned. "So what?" "It was clean." Zara's expression remained unreadable. "It was my offering." John's stomach twisted. "Your what?" "On Velari, when we clean for another, we purify the space. And when they accept an item from our hands, they accept us." John's brain stuttered. "Wait. Are you telling me that because I took that stupid coffee mug from you, I accidentally agreed to bonding?" Zara finished for him. Her voice was calm, but her glowing eyes watched him intently. "Yes." John let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a laugh and a groan. "Oh, come on. How was I supposed to know that?" Zara blinked slowly. "I assumed you understood our ways." "Well, I don't." John threw up his hands. "I don't know anything about Velari customs. I was just hiring a maid, not signing up for whatever this is." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zara lowered her gaze. "I have shamed myself." John opened his mouth to argue, but something about her posture made him hesitate. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even defensive. She was disappointed in herself. A wave of guilt hit him. He wasn't trying to make her feel bad, but this whole situation had spiraled into something completely unexpected. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Okay, look, let's just take a step back. Maybe there's a way to fix this." Zara nodded, but the shimmer in her skin had faded to a dull silver. "Perhaps," she murmured. John took a deep breath. "How about this? You can keep working here, but let's agree that there's no bonding ritual or sacred cleaning or whatever. Just a normal job. You clean, I pay you. That's it." Zara studied him, her glowing eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You wish for me to unbond?" John hesitated. Yeah, if that's possible." Zara was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "It is possible," she said, "but it will take time." John frowned. Time? How much time? Zira didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced around the apartment, as if sensing something unseen. Then she turned back to him. 3 cycles of the moon. John's eyebrows shot up. 3 months. Zira nodded solemnly. John groaned. "You're kidding me." "I do not joke about such things," Zira said. John sighed. "Fine. Okay. Whatever. Just do what you need to do. But let's be clear. I'm not part of any weird alien marriage or lifelong cleaning cult. Got it?" Zira's lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. "Understood, John Carter." John exhaled heavily, shaking his head. "Great, just great." But as he watched Zira return to cleaning, her movements smooth, precise, almost reverent, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just gotten himself into something much bigger than he realized. John tried to go back to his normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every time he walked into a freshly cleaned room, he felt like he was stepping into some kind of unspoken agreement. Every time he picked up a plate, a cup, or even sat on his couch, Zira would watch him with quiet intensity. It was unnerving. But the weirdest part, he was starting to get used to it. 3 days after their conversation, John woke up to the smell of something incredible. Not just coffee, though there was a fresh cup waiting for him on the counter, but something else. Something warm, rich, and slightly spicy. His stomach rumbled before he was even fully awake. He followed the scent into the kitchen and froze. Zira stood by the stove, her silver blue skin catching the morning light. She moved with slow, deliberate precision, turning what looked like a deep blue pancake onto a plate. Beside it sat a few other dishes, some kind of roasted vegetable, a creamy sauce, and what looked disturbingly like eggs, but shimmered faintly, as if reflecting invisible stars. John stared. "Oh, what is all this?" Zira turned, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Breakfast," she said simply. "Yeah, I figured that. But why?" Zira tilted her head. "You require sustenance. I have prepared food." John hesitated. He didn't remember asking for food. He didn't even know Zira could cook. He slowly walked forward and examined the plate. "Is this safe for humans?" Zira nodded. "I have adjusted the ingredients to suit your biology." That was both reassuring and slightly terrifying. Still, his stomach was practically screaming at him, so he picked up a fork and cautiously took a bite. The flavors hit him instantly, rich, slightly sweet, and completely unfamiliar. The pancake had a soft, almost fluffy texture, while the sauce added a savory contrast. The roasted vegetables were crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and had a smoky flavor that made him want to take another bite. John chewed slowly, looking at Zira in surprise. "This is really good." Zira's lips curved slightly, though her expression remained calm. "I am pleased you find it acceptable." John took another bite, then another. Before he knew it, the plate was empty. He leaned back with a sigh. "Okay, that was incredible. But I have to ask, why are you making me food now? I thought you were just here to clean." Zira hesitated. "I have observed your habits. You consume minimal nutrition in the morning, often only liquid stimulants. This is not optimal for human health." John frowned. "Wait, are you monitoring me?" Zira didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the sink and began cleaning the dishes, her movements smooth and precise. "I am ensuring your well-being," she said at last. John rubbed his face. "Okay, but I don't need a caretaker. Just a housekeeper." Zira paused, then turned to face him. "And yet, you accept my service." John opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. She wasn't wrong. He had eaten the food, and he had enjoyed it. He sighed. "Look, I appreciate what you're doing, but this whole thing still feels weird. You act like we have some kind of deeper connection, but I barely know you." Zira studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer. "Would you like to know me?" John blinked. "Ah, what?" Zira's glowing eyes locked onto his. "You say I act as if there is a deeper connection. That is because, to me, there is. My kind does not form bonds lightly. But when we do, we commit fully." John swallowed. "And you think we have that kind of bond?" Zira nodded. "It is not about romance, as you humans perceive it. It is about trust. Understanding. I wish to serve not because I must, but because I choose to." John exhaled slowly. "You make this sound a lot heavier than just a job." Zira tilted her head. "Perhaps it is." Silence filled the kitchen. For the first time, John saw something deeper behind her calm exterior. She wasn't just some alien housekeeper. She was someone who had made a choice he didn't fully understand yet. Finally, he nodded. "Okay. If we're gonna do this, let's start over. No weird bonding rituals, no sacred cleaning agreements. Just two people figuring this out." Zira's eyes flickered. "Very well, John Carter. We shall begin anew." But something told him that whatever had already begun wasn't going to be easy to undo. John thought things would settle down after their conversation. He figured if he just treated Zira like a regular housekeeper, things would go back to normal. But deep down, he knew nothing about this was normal. The way she moved around his house, the way she watched him, the way she seemed to anticipate his needs before he even said anything. It all felt too precise, too intentional. And then came the gifts. It started small. A neatly folded blanket draped over his couch when he forgot to grab one. A cup of tea waiting for him on nights he stayed up too late working. A replacement for the old, worn-out slippers he had never bothered to replace himself. Then, it got weirder. One evening after a long day, John walked into his bedroom and stopped dead in his tracks. There was something on his bed, a strange, shimmering fabric, neatly folded, along with a small metallic pendant. The fabric had an almost liquid-like texture, shifting between deep blue and silver as it caught the light. John cautiously picked it up. It felt soft, almost weightless. "What is this?" he muttered. "It is a gift." Zira's voice came from the doorway. John spun around. "Okay, yeah, I got that part. But why?" Zira stepped forward, her glowing eyes locked onto his. "Because you do not dress for proper rest." John blinked. "What?" Zira gestured toward his usual sleeping attire, an old t-shirt and sweatpants. "Your garments are inefficient for optimal recovery. This material regulates temperature and promotes deeper sleep." John exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Zira, I appreciate the thought, but you don't have to. It is already done." John stared at her. She wasn't asking him to accept it. She was telling him. He sighed, giving the fabric another glance. If he was honest, it did look comfortable. And the pendant. It had a strange, almost soothing hum when he touched it, like it was vibrating at some frequency he couldn't hear. "Fine. But this is the last time. Okay. No more random gifts." Zira's expression didn't change, but he swore he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. "Understood," she said. The next morning, John didn't know what was weirder, the fact that he had the best sleep of his life, or the fact that he felt watched while he was sleeping. He woke up feeling refreshed. Not groggy, not stiff, just good. That never happened. He pulled the pendant off his chest, examining it again. Had this thing really done something? Or was it just placebo? He was about to get up when he noticed something on his nightstand. A small silver bowl filled with berries. John frowned. He definitely hadn't put that there. Before he could even process it, Zira's voice came from the doorway. "They are safe for consumption." John jumped. "Would you stop doing that?" Zira tilted her head. "Doing what?" Appearing out of nowhere. She blinked. "I have always been here." John groaned. running a hand down his face. Okay, fine, but what's with the berries? Zira stepped closer. They contain nutrients that complement your morning meal. They also promote energy and focus. John hesitated. You're preparing my meals now. Zira nodded. You require proper sustenance. John exhaled. Zira, I don't. You will accept it. John blinked. Excuse me. Zira's gaze was steady, unyielding. You resist care. You dismiss gifts, but you do not refuse their benefits. John opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. She wasn't wrong. He had slept better. He had liked the food she made before. And despite himself, he was already reaching for the berries. He popped one into his mouth, chewing slowly. A strange, but pleasant, sweet tart flavor exploded across his tongue. These are good, he admitted. Zira nodded, as if that was never in question. John sighed. All right, let's just set some boundaries here, okay? No more weird surprises. If you want to do something, ask me first. Zira studied him for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded. I understand, she said. John exhaled in relief. Good. Then she added, I will find less surprising ways to ensure your well-being. John groaned. He was starting to think he wasn't in control of this situation at all. John woke up to the soft hum of his kitchen, a sound that had somehow become both comforting and slightly unsettling. Zira had a way of making the simplest things feel like part of a larger, intricate plan. He had grown used to her quiet presence, but the tension that hung in the air between them was still palpable. He hadn't realized how much he'd come to rely on her until the day she did something he hadn't expected. It started like any other morning. He went through his usual routine: shower, get dressed, grab a quick cup of coffee. But when he walked into the kitchen, something felt off. Zira wasn't there. Zira, he called out, feeling the odd silence swallow the sound of his voice. No answer. He checked the living room, the hallway, the bathroom. Nothing. A small knot of anxiety started to form in his chest. Where was she? He hadn't seen her leave. He paced back to the kitchen, his eyes darting from corner to corner, almost expecting her to suddenly appear with a tray of food or another random offering. But there was nothing. He sat down at the table, tapping his fingers on the surface. Maybe she went out for something. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She never left without a word, without some kind of explanation. And she was more than just a housekeeper. She'd become something more. An hour passed, and the worry began to rise. John wasn't sure why this silence unsettled him so much. He had never been the type to rely on anyone, much less an alien, to keep his life in order. Yet here he was, pacing back and forth in his kitchen, restless and unsure. Just as the minutes seemed to stretch into eternity, the front door creaked open. John whipped around, his heart racing. He was relieved, until he saw who had walked in. It wasn't Zira. The woman who entered looked nothing like her, but there was something familiar about the way she carried herself, the way she moved with an air of certainty. John froze. Who are you? He asked, his voice more tense than he intended. The woman smiled, her eyes dark and intense. I'm here to speak with the one who hired Zira. John's pulse quickened. What is this? Some kind of joke. The woman's smile didn't waver. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in assessment. You think you have control over this situation. But the truth is, Zira was never meant to be here. Not like this. John's head spun. What are you talking about? Who are you? She held up her hand, stopping him before he could speak further. I know you're confused. I understand the bond you formed with her. But trust me, this is bigger than you think. This is dangerous for both of you. John's mind raced. Dangerous. What did she mean? Zira had only ever been kind to him, if a little. Intense. But dangerous. Where is she? John demanded, standing up, his frustration and fear starting to show. What have you done to her?" The woman didn't flinch. "She's still here, but not for long." "What's that supposed to mean?" The woman's expression softened for just a moment. "Zira wasn't sent to be your maid. She was sent to observe, to study. This bond you think you've developed. It's not what you think." John felt like he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. He stepped closer, trying to process everything. "What are you saying?" "Zyra's not here to clean. She's here to study me." The woman nodded, her eyes shifting to the side, as if weighing her next words. "Yes, but there's more. You weren't supposed to be this important. You were just a subject, an ordinary human. But something changed. Zira started to care." John's heart pounded. "Care? She cares about you, John. And it's something neither of you can control. You are no longer just an experiment. She's made a choice. And that changes everything." John opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. His thoughts were racing, everything from the last few weeks flashing before his eyes. The gifts, the quiet moments with Zira, the way she seemed to know exactly what he needed before he did. "So what does this mean?" he finally asked, barely able to get the words out. "Is she in danger? Am I?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at him, as if sizing him up. Then, with a slow breath, she spoke again. "Zira's people do not take kindly to emotional connections forming where they were never meant to. You're an anomaly. The longer you stay connected to her, the more dangerous this becomes for both of you." John felt a chill run down his spine. "But I don't want to hurt her," he said, his voice tight. "I know," the woman said softly. "But the risk of what could happen is not something you can control anymore." The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. John stared at the woman, his mind spinning. He wanted to know more, but at the same time, he was afraid of what he might learn next. Before he could speak again, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Zira stepped into the room, her eyes locking onto the woman instantly. "Leave him," Zira said, her voice sharp. The calm that usually radiated from her now replaced with an edge John hadn't heard before. The woman didn't move, but there was a flicker of surprise in her gaze. "You're still here?" she asked, a little incredulous. Zira's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not going anywhere." John turned between the two of them, his heart still pounding in his chest. The tension was suffocating. The two women, one human, one alien, stared each other down as if they were on the brink of something neither of them was ready for. John's world was spinning out of control, and he was beginning to realize that he was at the center of something far bigger than he could have imagined. John sat at the kitchen table, staring at Zira and the mysterious woman who had appeared earlier. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, as though a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. Zira stood with an almost regal composure, her arms crossed, eyes locked firmly on the woman who had just revealed so much about the nature of their connection. "You need to leave," Zira repeated, her voice firm, but there was an undercurrent of something John couldn't quite place. Fear, defiance, a mixture of both. The woman didn't flinch. In fact, she appeared almost intrigued by Zira's sudden change in demeanor. "You think you can just walk away from this?" she asked, her voice cold and unyielding. "You think I won't find a way to correct the mistake you've made?" Zira's eyes narrowed. "You are not welcome here, and neither is your interference. I made my choice." John was still trying to piece everything together. A part of him felt that his whole life had just been upended. Everything he thought he knew about Zira, the kindness, the gifts, the connection, was now being questioned. But even as doubts began to creep into his mind, he found himself wanting to believe in her. He didn't want to accept that she was anything other than what she had shown him. The caring, thoughtful alien who had made his life easier, better, even. The woman glanced at John, her eyes cold, assessing. "Do you understand the magnitude of what she's done? You think this is some harmless connection, some alien maid playing at being human. You think it's just a harmless Infatuation. The woman scoffed. You are playing with forces you don't even begin to understand. John swallowed hard, his throat dry. I don't care what you say. She's not just a maid or some experiment. She's real, and she's not the problem here. For a moment, there was only silence in the room, and for the first time since meeting Zyra, John felt a growing sense of dread. The woman's words, harsh and bitter, were starting to sink in, leaving him feeling exposed and vulnerable. Could Zyra really be in danger? And if so, what was going to happen to them both? Zyra moved toward John, placing a hand gently on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring, even though her eyes remained locked on the woman across from them. It's not about what she thinks you deserve, John. It's about what we deserve, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet but undeniable determination. The woman's lips curled into a sneer. What you deserve? You're a fool to think your choice won't have consequences. The reality of this bond, is far more than you can fathom. John shook his head, fighting to keep his emotions in check. He could feel the heat of the woman's stare burning into him, but it was Zyra's calm presence that kept him grounded. She wasn't just a maid, not just an alien sent to observe him. She had become so much more than that, and he couldn't let go of her. He wouldn't. I don't care what you say. Zyra is my choice, and I'm not afraid of whatever consequences you think are coming. John's voice was steadier now, more resolute. Zyra's grip tightened on his shoulder, as though offering him her strength in that moment. The woman's eyes flicked from John to Zyra, and there was something in her gaze that shifted, a flicker of something almost reluctant. You truly believe this won't end in tragedy? That you can both walk away from what you've done, and everything will be fine? The woman's voice was quieter now, almost sorrowful. You're blind, John, but you will see. You will all see. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. John's heart hammered in his chest, but Zyra didn't flinch. She stood her ground, and he knew in that moment that he had to stand by her, no matter what. I don't need to see your vision of what's coming, John replied. What I see is a future with Zyra. That's all I need. The woman laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. It was bitter, mocking. Foolish human, you don't understand the depths of what you've gotten yourself into. Your future may not be as simple as you think. Zyra's people will never let you go so easily, and you may find that she's already made a decision, one that involves you more deeply than you could imagine. John frowned. What does that mean? But the woman didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the door, her movements deliberate and cold. You will find out soon enough, she said cryptically, before vanishing from the room, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. Zyra took a deep breath and turned to John. Her expression was unreadable, but John could see the faintest tremor in her hands. He reached out, taking her hand in his, grounding her, just as she had grounded him so many times before. Zyra, what did she mean? What's going to happen to us? Zyra's eyes softened, though her jaw was set in determination. I made my choice, John. I will not regret it. But the path ahead will not be easy, and I cannot promise that it won't come with great sacrifice. John's heart sank. Sacrifice. What did she mean by that? He could feel the weight of her words, the uncertainty that hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I'll be with you, John said, his voice unwavering. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Zyra smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. I hope you're ready for what's to come, John, because this is just the beginning. And in that moment, John realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The connection between them, between a human and an alien, was far deeper, far more complicated than he had ever anticipated. But no matter what lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He would not let her go. Not now, not ever. As Zyra led him into the unknown future, he braced himself for the trials that were sure to come. But whatever the price, he was ready to face it. For her, for them. Because in his heart, he knew that this bond was something worth fighting for. John awoke to the sound of rain tapping gently against the windows, its steady rhythm filling the room with an eerie calmness. The events of the past few days had felt like a whirlwind, pulling him in directions he never imagined. His life, once simple, now felt like a series of escalating choices, each one bringing him closer to an unknown future. But as he turned over in bed, reaching for Zara's side, he realized it was empty. Panic surged through him for a moment. Was she gone? Had she disappeared like the woman who had threatened them? He sat up quickly, heart pounding, only to hear the faintest sound of movement from the living room. John slipped out of bed, his bare feet meeting the cold floor as he moved toward the source of the noise. He crept softly, trying not to disturb the stillness of the house. As he entered the living room, he stopped in his tracks. Zara was standing by the window, her back to him, staring out at the rain. Her posture was tense, her hands clasped together in front of her. And her expression was one he had never seen before. Unfamiliar, distant. Zara. John's voice was soft, tentative, as though afraid to break the fragile silence that enveloped the room. She didn't turn around, but he could see her shoulders stiffen. It was as if she hadn't heard him at all, or perhaps she was too deep in thought to respond. The weight of the words they had shared the day before hung heavy between them. The threat the woman had left behind still loomed over their heads like a dark cloud. John stepped closer, his feet making soft sounds on the carpet. He didn't want to push her, but the uncertainty was gnawing at him. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "I'm right here, Zara. You don't have to face this alone." Zara's body seemed to relax under his touch, but she didn't speak right away. The silence stretched on, thick and unyielding. John could feel her internal struggle, the weight of decisions she had made, the burden of her past, and the uncertain future they now faced together. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "John, I have been trained to be many things. A servant, a caretaker, an observer. But never have I been taught how to love in the way you do. In the way humans do." John's heart skipped a beat at her words. There it was again, her vulnerability, her uncertainty. She was more than just the alien maid. She was something far more complex, something John was only beginning to understand. She had come to Earth to fulfill a mission, to carry out her duty. But in the time she had spent with him, something had changed. And now that change was becoming something neither of them could control. "I know it's not easy," John replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But whatever this is, we're in it together. I'm not asking for you to be something you're not. Just be with me. That's all I need." Zara finally turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from his face, her touch tender, as though trying to memorize the feeling of it. "I never thought I would find someone like you. Someone who would see me for who I am, not for what I was sent here to do." Her voice cracked, betraying the deep feelings she had kept hidden. "But now that I have, I fear the cost. I fear what might happen if we continue down this path." John took her hands in his, grounding her. "We don't know what the future holds, but we can face it together. Whatever happens, we're stronger together. You've already shown me that. Don't you see? This, whatever it is between us, it's real. It's not just a mistake or some mission for you. It's us."